Good morning and welcome to the ETSI virtual event on boosting the impact of research and innovation through standardization. I'm Guy Daniels, and joining me now from Portugal is Rui Aguiar, who's steering board chairman of Networld2020. Rui is also a professor at the University of Aveiro and is an advisor to the Portuguese government on 5G policies. He has more than 500 published papers on advanced wireless networks and systems. Welcome, Rui. Thank you for joining us. Tell us more about Networld2020 and how we can link research into a successful strategy for technology development.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for this invitation and for that question, which allow me to explain to our audience what Networld2020 is. Now, in a very simple thing, Networld2020 is what we call an European technology platform. This means it's a body, a volunteering body, where parties interested, in this case in communications, join to discuss the future of our area and to provide contributions that they may be taken afterwards by, companies, by research projects, by the European Union for different types of actions. Now, in our reality, when I say that we are a huge organization, we are about 1,040, something like that. And this covers from the big manufacturers, from the big operators, but then also to a huge amount of innovative SMEs. For the most of the academia in Europe is associated with Networld2020, and we even have 150, something like that, organizations which are not European and are also contributing and following our work. Now, when I'm talking about our work, what do we do? Well, we basically have four major activities at this moment, four major working groups. I can start by a very recent group on vertical technology, which is communications that are oriented to the future challenges of society. We have a working group on SMEs. This working group has a very specific mandate, which is to engage SMEs in innovative ecosystems, in the research that's done across whole Europe. And then we have two other groups, which I would say really more on the technical side. A satellite working group, which aims to bring the problems and the voice of the satellite community into the 5G, 6G community research, and the expert working group. And this expert working group is where we actually deal with the key technical challenges that we see that may be in front of us, not only in Europe, but across the whole world. And actually, this explanation is required given the scope of this theme, research to standards, how to boost that. Well, we do have a sort of mental framework. So you do have, the vision and strategy and beginning, as you see in the picture. Then you move to the kind of, concept exploration. So from that very visionary things, you start to figure out what may or may not seem reasonable to develop. Then from that, you launch all your technology development, right? That technology development starts by, very early proof of concepts, and you are then maturing it, progressing it until you start binding it with the standard definition. Now, currently, with the changes that we have, all leads to a sort of changes in terms of the ecosystem. So there is an ecosystem restructuring happening at the same time until, finally you reach, the standards and the market. Now, in this whole, process flow, there are several parts where Networld2020 can actually help. So in terms of the very early parts, we have a document called Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, which actually aims to set up the identification of the key technologies. Now, that document is then, from our point of view, consumed. We produce that document and we deliver it both to the European Union, both to the standardization bodies, both to the research project, in order to aid them to identify how they should progress on their own mandate along what we see as very long innovation lines, very long-term innovation lines. We also proceed in other aspects. For instance, we do look into this SME stuff in terms of the ecosystem reconfiguration. We try to bring new SMEs, innovative SMEs, into this big world, and to facilitate their interaction with big players, providing disruptive solutions. We also try to provide some linkage with the groups that are considering the development of standards, and we try to coordinate with them in such a way to at least highlight what could be the potential for standards. And then, of course, it moves into the standards and with companies and the IPR of the companies, and then hopefully as the standards get a reality and leads to new technologies that the end user can actually explore. So we are trying to facilitate and boost this process from research to standards in different points. But I would say, as a summary, that the key differentiating factor is that we are really presenting a document which highlights most challenging and technically interesting areas for the future.
Well, thank you for that overview. What technical developments and what technical contributions is Networld 2020 making?
Well, this is a question that I never like to answer. Now, let me try to give an idea about what we are talking about. So this strategic research and innovation agenda, it's a document that we try to revive or update every 2 to 3 years. Unfortunately, with the pressures in the last years, it's really every 2 years. But the development of this document, from the moment we start until we finish it, it's about 10 months. It's a huge amount of effort. The last document actually had about 150 contributors in the end when it was closed, coming from 90-something organizations, different organizations. So we are talking about a huge community effort. I can't really quantify it in terms of the manpower that's spent, but we are talking about many dozens of manpower which are collectively spent from the community in this document. And then, unsurprisingly, we are talking about something with 220 pages on that order of magnitude. So trying to actually pinpoint the detailed technologies that are there addressed, it's very hard. But what I can tell you, and I invite all the audience to actually download the document, which is publicly available. This is a result of a public process with community contributions. So we sort of identified a couple of, I would say, traditional areas and not so traditional areas which are relevant for the future of communications in Europe. And of course, on the traditional areas, I can say that radio technology and associated signal processing is common. I can also tell you that optical communications that people don't usually associate, or many people don't associate to mobile communications, but it's an essential part of the core of the network, or even satellite technologies, which I mentioned. I would say these are very traditional, very focused areas. And of course, we also have global system architecture and global network design, which are, I would say, traditional areas from the most fundamental communication research. But then we are now in a different world. Now, in that different world, there are two things that we cannot avoid. One thing is, security, both network and service security. we cannot avoid the security challenges that this interconnected society is bringing to us. And we cannot also avoid the challenges of developing new services, and new services that have to follow, at least in Europe, our society guidance. They have to follow, the GDPR. They have to follow human rights. They have to follow ethical AI considerations. So all these are areas which we cannot avoid, and we should start to consider them as also becoming traditional. Now, two other things that we also did and identified was the strong dependence on components, devices and components. Now, the challenge that we are seeing, both on the optical domain, both on the radio domain, and even in terms of the sheer amount of bit rate of information that we are expecting to process, are pushing and presenting a wide set of challenges for the semiconductor, for the device and materials industry. So we also were recognizing the kind of challenge that we have there. And finally, it's, probably not surprising, we do also address the concepts of emerging technologies and challenging trends. For instance, one of my favorites is something called mobile, the air network. The fact that we are going to have, flying networks around us, we'll be able to have connectivity, even if you are, for instance, in a plane, or we'll have the connectivity required for guiding all the drones around us that we can imagine. So all of these areas have been actually the focus of a specific chapter in that document. In some cases, like the system architecture, we actually broke that in two parts because we divided a part of that chapter, creating another one, dedicated explicitly to the current challenges in terms of edge, how we are moving to the edge and how can we integrate increasing intelligence in the edge in the overall network design. So, as I said, all these corresponded to 20, 30 pages of discussion about interesting topics that we will have in the future. And we identify those topics further in terms of these are topics that we can do with some effort now, we can progress research and reach that. And then also topics that we identify that this is really far away. We need to start on the fundamentals now and progress if we want to reach this in a 5, 7, 8 years time frame.
Now, the diagram you presented that takes us from research through to standards, it's very clear that there's a lot of actors involved in this. Even just when we look at Europe, there's a lot of actors in the whole process. Are they all aware of the need to coordinate, align, and create this sort of cohesive vision and roadmap, if you like, to take research through to standards?
Well, I would say that this event is a demonstration that we are all aware of the challenge. And I would say that the good thing about this event that ETSI has pushed is that it brought a couple of those actors at the same time together. And what that diagram represents, it's probably not, the final vision on what we can do, but I would say it's very much a potential vision about how we naturally are gravitating ourselves. Because these people that we have here at this moment, we all know each other. We all know what we've been doing. And I think there is a very good spirit of cooperation in Europe at this moment. We understand the challenges. I think maybe we should say that we are afraid. We understand that the communications world that was so easy to sort of assess 20 years ago, now we find ourselves in a communications world which is actually essential for the functioning of our society. And this is a huge responsibility. And I think we all share that vision, we all share that responsibility. And as such, we are trying to find out how we can, leverage on the work of each other, contribute to the work of each other in order of maximize the overall effort that all of us are doing.
Final question to you. Do you have any advice for the standards community in terms of how they act with the research community? For example, are there any different cultural issues that they need to be aware of?
Okay, so this is a very good question. I think I'm now going to be not politically correct because there is a very fundamental challenge. And it's related with what's the objective. Now, as an academic, my drive is to publish. I try to publish as fast as possible. On the other hand, the same approach to innovation from the part of the companies, it usually goes back through the need to retain IPR on that innovation, which means that they don't publish as fast as possible. They actually first try to reserve that IPR. Now, this is here a culture clash. I mean, we've all been living on that in all the joint projects that industry and academia does, but then in the end does reflect on standardization, because you don't push anything to standardization until you are, reasonably safe in terms of your IPR rights. So how can we make sure that we bring academics in a world where, or let's say not necessarily academics, but at least people which are more interested in the research up front? Maybe it's disruptive, maybe because they are SMEs that don't have the ability to go to the IPR wars, for instance. But how do you bring those innovative things into an environment where a large part of the elements are very concerned on the IPR? Yes, in the end, they may concede the IPR for fair usage, but there is a period on this process where the situation is, I would say, not very clear for this tussle between reclaiming IPR and being disruptive and bringing new things to the world as fast as possible. I really don't know how to solve this problem. I think it's a challenge that we have. It's an economical and market challenge that we need to solve, and standardization somewhat suffers from this.
Well, thank you very much, Rui. It's certainly an important issue and one that we do need to give a lot more consideration to. Now, we'll be speaking with you again later today during our panel session, but thank you for now. Over the next 2 days, we have a full agenda of presentations, panels and interviews. Details and timings are on the website. And if you miss anything, don't worry, it will all be available to watch later on demand. Stay with us for our next session, an interview with Marcus Muirk, Vice Chairman of the ETSI Board, who will be discussing ETSI as a platform for research and innovation. Goodbye for now.